film begins with a quote about friendship, that friendship is the home, is a kind of home for men, a William Blake quote. And it's a very delicate, human film about the sort of birth of the northwestern part of America, which Kelly's films are often about, in Oregon. And it's about two guys who are in flight, we don't really know why, and they meet each other, and they come across a cow, a single cow, the first cow in that part of America, and they steal from the cow in order to make the cakes you've talked about, and they begin to dream about a business. And we realise that, without it being an allegory or anything, something more poetic than an allegory, we realise that we're talking about the American dream on some level, and certainly about capitalism. And if that makes it sound dry, it isn't at all. It's a love story between two men, but it's also a love story between Kelly and the landscape, which is sort of an ongoing love story, I would say. And indeed by the cinematographer Christopher Blauvelt, who does an amazing job at seeming to to find a way of shooting the American landscape that seems to be, authentically shot at that moment in the 1820s.
And into this world that you've just described comes your character, not the chief actor, but chief factor. Yeah, which is an interesting title. So, and even though when we meet you and you're loving their cakes, we do realise that you're, well, I don't think this is let's say you're not necessarily the most pleasant person going. Tell us how chief factor fits into the story.
Well, a factor at that time was someone involved in trade, and the chief industry at that time is the trading of pelts, beaver pelts specifically. So there's money to be made, and he's an English guy who's exporting these pelts and making a lot of money. And it's his cow that has been imported from Jersey to provide milk for the tea that he serves rather pretentiously to not just a local captain who he's trying to show off how sophisticated he is, but also to Native American chiefs, because there's a sort of fragile coalition going on at that time between the Native American, the Native Americans in that part of Oregon. And so you see my character, in a way, he's their ticket out of there, because he's going to pay them to make these delicious cakes, because he doesn't yet realise that he's actually being robbed in order for that to happen. So there's an element of foolishness. I'm not sure how evil he is. I think he's very much a product of his time. It certainly wouldn't help me to play him to realise that he was in any way a baddie.
There's a lovely moment in which he asks them to make a very particular dish, which I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, Toby. Cluffy tea. And there is such relish in this word. Can you make a cluffy tea? And he says brilliantly that the reason he wants to make it, apart from the fact that you're obviously enjoying the word as much as you're enjoying the cake, is that he says, I want to serve it because I want to shame him. And there is this marvellous kind of, it's big drama on the tiniest scale.
Yes. I think the film starts, doesn't it, with that amazing contemporary, like from now, a tanker going across the screen, and it's a mysterious image, because you thought you were going to be in the 1820s, but you realise that the cow that we see later is almost the tanker's the end product of the cow in a way. And the whole film is based on these exchanges, which will eventually, I suppose, develop into the America we know now.
And Toby, I just want to ask you one other thing. I mean, I really love the film. I'm a fan of Kelly Reichardt anyway. But I've said before in the past that you have, a scene-stealing ability that is matched by almost nobody. The introduction to you in this film is so brilliant, because
everybody in the film is kind of, shades of grey, and there's a lot of mud. You can feel the earth, and it's all kind of, there's a lot of trudging through dark environments. And literally the first shot of you, top hat, dressed pristine you are.
Yes, I am. Clearly, I'm not wearing that. Get me a top hat.
And I read that John and Orion, the two main guys, were sent off on survival boot camp and learned how to make fires and all that kind of stuff. And then anyone who looks at you in this movie thinking, yeah, and you didn't go on that boot camp.
I was hanging out in Portland, mate. I wasn't there. No, I think, the thing that touches me most of, and there are many things about this film that touch me hugely, but the delicate, the fragile, beautiful relationship between those two actors that they conjure, this beautiful sort of Edenic, innocent, naive, sort of unusual relationship that they have, and the way that the film doesn't question it or problematize it in any way is such a gift that, if you can call it that, that Kelly Reichardt gives in this story. It's so beautifully understated, and yet it means so much,
Bong Joon-ho, who was on the program a while back talking about Parasite, is a huge fan of this film. In fact, he said he's jealous of the movie. But I thought the most interesting quote from Kelly Reichardt, she was talking about all this stuff. She said, "My films are glimpses of people passing through," and that's certainly true of this film, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I think it's just a very. It's fascinating, isn't it, to think that this is going to result in modern industrial, post-industrial America, in high-tech America. It's just fascinating because, in a way, all the negotiations that are taking place, you can't help thinking about that. You can't help thinking about multinational companies, even in the way that, in a small way, that these people are being screwed over,
There's a character detail that is said about your character, which is he's somebody who cannot imagine that he is being stolen from. And I thought that was a really lovely thumbnail detail that tells you so much about what kind of character he is.
Yeah, complacent, entitled, limited. In a way, America's too big for him. There's a beautiful image at the end where there's an enclosure around the cow, and I think that image of the cow, which we've seen beautifully, the milk being beautifully coaxed from him by John, as Cookie sort of milks the cow and talks delicately to the cow, and then at the end we see the cow fenced off, and in a way I think that the chief factor, who isn't even granted a name, is that fencing process, the smallness, the restriction of this, this extraordinarily beautiful country that it hasn't yet been exploited.
I was interested that you used a phrase a couple of minutes ago, Toby, talking about there's an element of foolishness in the story. And when my wife said to me, who's on the show this week, I said Toby Jones, and then obviously she was delighted.
He's a cuddling fool.
And she said, "What's the film?" And I said, "It's about these two guys, and they're sort of setting up a business, and they make these extraordinary cakes, but they're stealing milk from Toby Jones's cow." And she said, "Is it a comedy?" And I realised that the way I described it, which is clearly true, but maybe that would, clearly my setup was rather poor, but there is that kind of element of foolishness, almost farcical at times in the story.
Well, yeah, I thought originally, oh, this is a fable of some kind, that there's a lesson to learn here, but it's not as restricted as that. But it has the simplicity, or if you want to call it like a bit like a joke, a guy brings a cow into a country and doesn't realize it's being stolen, and enjoys the things that are being stolen from him. But I think it's more poetic than a fable in a way, or a parable, which isn't to suggest it's being pompous in any way. It's so rooted in the earth. It's not trying to teach any lessons. It's just literally, she's literally just suggesting things, alluding to things, and that's why her cinema is so extraordinary, I think.
Yeah. And also, most importantly, go and see this in a cinema. I didn't have the opportunity to. I watched it on my laptop in the middle of the day, and a lot of the film is very, dark. In the dark. It's, very dark. You need this to be projected on a big screen, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's dark, but when it's light, it's just this amazing colours that I remember filming in. That Christopher is just, his cinematography is so extraordinary. I don't know if you agree, you guys, but I just think it's so, you can sort of smell that era in the smoke and the leaves and then these sort of like almost joke-like trappers being enraptured by these cakes. These guys haven't tasted anything for months as they've been out in the wilderness, and they come in and suddenly they've got a cookie. It's kind of incredible.
I think that one of the things that's remarkable about her films is her use of Kelly Reichardt's use of not widescreen frames of 4:3 in Academy. She understands that ratios don't have to be wide to be expansive. That actually there is something about an older cinema ratio that can feel completely immersive, and particularly in those shots in which you see characters with their faces behind ferns, and it's hard to make out what's the foliage and what's the person. And I think that cinematography.
But that's saying something as well, isn't it? I think that's saying something as well about the state of that nation at that time, about people were still in and of the land, and also just a very deliberate way that she holds on a scene that appears to be over. It just has a little bit of Native American dialogue, between two people, and it's just like going, this is also going on. This is also happening. It's not just about the people in charge,
And always remember, if you're trapping beavers, eat the tail.
Eat the tail. Eat the tail. No wonder you need the cake. You're not eating up the tail.
First Cow is in cinemas from next week. Toby, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. What else? I know you always have like half a dozen things all on the go at the same time. What are you working on at the moment, or what do we see you in next?
I'm just about to start one of those projects I'm not allowed to talk about, so I'm not talking about that.
Is it Star Wars? Is it Bond?
It's that sort of project. But during lockdown we filmed a film about Tetris, the game Tetris, which is a great film that John Baird has directed, which is a lot of fun.
Toby, thanks very much for talking to us.
Good pleasure. Thanks. See you guys.
Toby Jones. So it's a Toby Jones show. There'll obviously be Toby Jones shows from now on, but he always blesses us with a splendid few minutes. And you're right about his arrival in the film. He's the only one who's had a wash.
One of the things about Kelly Reichardt's film, this film in particular, is that it doesn't have much incidental music. There's the sound of the guy playing the violin, who's always in the middle of the job, constantly playing the violin. And I did think after about day 3 somebody would have gone out and brained him with a large frying pan. But when Toby turns up to that first shot, and he's got the hat, and he's got the thing, and he looks like he's walked in from another film. And which of course is the point, because his character is completely out of his depth where he is, and he doesn't understand it. But you're right, the scene of him enjoying the cake is a pleasure to behold and made my mouth water.
Have I imagined this, that there's a scene where one of the, in my head, maybe I've just imagined this, maybe it's a dream, one of the fur trappers takes out what used to be referred to as a Jew's harp, starts playing it,
yes,
and one of the other guys smacks him around the head and basically tries to cut that out. And I was thinking, yes, you're speaking for everybody. Obviously, it was just a tuneless racket.
Yeah, he gets it out and he plays it for about a minute before the guy overtakes him and just pushes him off the track.
Yeah,
and then he looks up. But that's the comedy. I mean, we'll review the film properly next week. But it's funny because when you said that when you described it to the good lady ceramicist, she said, "Is it a comedy?" No, but there are comedic things in it, and actually that pushing over the guy playing the down, 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 because it's one noise. It doesn't matter what you do with your mouth; it's one noise.
And interestingly, the book that it's based on, which is called The Half-Life by Jonathan Raymond, Doesn't feature a cow at all. So it was one of those books that was quite difficult to adapt, I think, and the only way they worked out what to do was to get rid of most of it and put in a cow. Anyway, so that's to be reviewed next week. Thanks to Toby Jones.